We'll now be able to implement the expires and posted fields within our clip structure because we now have our time structure implemented. So we'll start with the expires field right here. So we can just double click on expires to open up that file. Just as with our other fields, we're going to have our usual using statements. So we'll have clipAir, deserialize, serialize, and fromster. In addition, we'll also want to use our time structure that we just created. So we can access it using create domain time. I'm accessing it using an absolute path. So we're going to access it straight from the top, go into the domain, and then access time. That way we don't have to get lost in calling too many supers or too little supers. For our expire structure, we're going to name it expires. And that's going to have an option containing a time. Not all clips will expire, and if we don't want the clip to expire, then we just won't have a time at all, so that'll just be a none. We'll then derive clone, debug, deserialize, and serialize. In our implementation block, we'll need a new function. We're going to use a generic function, and we're going to use into option time since it is optional, similarly to what we did with our password and title. So that'll be generic type t, return self. We'll then just call expires.into. And again, just like with the title, when we call .into, if we get a time by itself, it'll automatically be placed into an option. That way we have the correct type. Just like all the other fields, we also want an into inner function. That will just extract the inner type. Just use self.0 to take it out. And we'll also implement default. And for our default, we'll have none because we don't want an expiration date as our default time. The last thing we'll implement is fromster. And again, we just have our air type is going to be a clipAir. We'll do fromster. The first thing that we'll check for this is if we actually get a string at all. So if it's an empty string, we're just going to return none. And this can happen since we're working with a web service. The user might submit a field, and the field will just be blank, but the field will still exist. In those cases, we'll just have an empty string. We want to ensure that that empty string is treated as no expiration date. If we do get something back, we'll just match on it, and we'll use the time fromster function that we just made in the previous video on our time module. If we get a time back, then we'll just do OK, and we'll create a new time, or a new expiration, sorry. And if we get an error, we'll just pass it on, and we'll convert it into a clip error. If we take a look at our time module, we'll see that our error is actually a chrono parse error, and that's why we're going to call .into to turn that error into a clip error. And if we take a look at our error enumeration that we created earlier, we'll see that we have the invalid date parse error right here, and that's going to convert from a parse error. So we'll get a clip error, date parse error if the date fails to parse in our expiration module. Now that we have our expiration module done, we can copy and paste these using statements at the top, and we'll go work on our posted module. So if we go down here and double click on posted to open up that module, we can then paste in those using statements. We actually don't need the fromster in this case, and we are going to use derive more, and we'll use the constructor macro. Our structure is going to be named posted, and it's just going to have a time. We'll need to derive clone constructor, and that'll automatically implement a new function for us, debug, deserialize, and serialize. For our implementation block, we're going to have a into inner function. Now let's convert it to the inner time, and that's all we need for the posted functionality. We also won't be needing this clip error since no errors can occur in this particular module. This field is inherently simple because this is only going to be managed by the service itself. So whenever a new clip is created, we're just going to automatically generate a posted structure using the new function provided by the constructor macro, and that's just going to be saved as part of the clip. So nothing really can go wrong with this particular field. Now that we've completed both of the expires and posted fields, we're able to move on to the last remaining field, which is the ID field.